All right, today we are diving into something called systems thinking. It's basically a toolkit for seeing the whole picture, for understanding those hidden forces that are constantly shaping our lives, our businesses, and, well, pretty much everything.
But let's start with a question that really gets to the heart of why this stuff is so important. Have you ever seen a solution that just seemed so obvious, so full of common sense, get put into place, only to completely blow up in everyone's face? Or even worse, actually make the problem bigger? It happens all the time, and it's because our intuition, our gut feeling, often leads us astray when we're up against really complex, interconnected problems.
Okay, let's look at a couple of classic examples. Traffic jams are awful, right? So what's the common sense fix? Build more highways. But what almost always happens is this thing called induced demand. Basically, those new, empty roads just encourage more people to drive, and before you know it, you're right back to having even more traffic. Or think about the drug trade. The obvious fix is to just crack down harder. But when you do that, the risk goes up, which drives the price up, and suddenly the potential profits are so high that you actually attract more dealers into the game. Whoops.
Now, here's the wild part. This isn't random. It's actually predictable. Jay Forrester, one of the pioneers in this whole field, he just nailed it when he said this. Complex systems have this uncanny ability to push back against our simple common sense fixes. And that is exactly why systems thinking is so necessary. I mean, if our first guess always worked, we wouldn't need a better way to think, would we? So, to really get a grip on why these things happen, and more importantly, how we can actually start to make changes that stick, we have to stop just reacting to what's right in front of our faces. We need a way to look deeper. And that way of looking deeper, it's called the iceberg model. It's such a great way to picture the hidden layers of pretty much any problem you can think of. Because as we all know, what we see on the surface is just the tiny, tiny tip. Okay, so right at the top, the part sticking out of the water, we have events. This is just what's happening right now. A customer just canceled their subscription. A key piece of machinery just broke down. It's the immediate thing. And our natural human response is just to react. Fix the machine, call the customer. Problem solved. Or is it? Because if we look just below the waterline, we might start to see patterns. Suddenly, it's not just the machine broke, it's, wait a minute, this specific machine breaks down every Tuesday afternoon. It's not just a customer left, it's, our churn rate has been creeping up 5% every single month. And once you see patterns, you can shift from just reacting to actually anticipating what's coming next. And here, you can see the whole shebang, because below the patterns, you find the structures. Think of these as the rules of the game, the incentives, the policies, the way things are set up that cause those patterns to happen. And then way down at the bottom, you've got the mental models. These are the deep-seated beliefs and assumptions we all have that keep the entire structure locked in place. And here's the most important part. Real, lasting change almost never happens by just reacting to events. It happens when you dive deep and start to redesign the structures and transform the mental models that are driving everything. Okay, let's zoom in on that structure level for a second. This is where you find the hidden engine of the whole system. This is what generates all the behavior we see on the surface. And it all comes down to one word: feedback. When you boil it all down, there are really only two kinds of feedback loops that build any system. First, you have reinforcing loops. Think of a snowball rolling downhill. They just amplify and accelerate change, creating either exponential growth or sometimes total collapse. On the other hand, you have balancing loops. These act more like a thermostat. They're all about creating stability and resisting change to keep things within a certain range. So let's see a reinforcing loop in action. A market panic is a perfect, if scary, example. It starts with just a little bit of fear. That fear leads to some selling. That selling causes the price to drop. And what happens when people see the price dropping? Well, that creates even more fear. And around and around and around it goes. See how each step just makes the next one bigger? That's a classic reinforcing loop, a vicious cycle. Okay, so if a system's behavior is really being driven by these hidden structures, then the million-dollar question becomes, where do you push? Where's the best place to intervene to actually get the change you want? This, my friends, is where we find something called leverage. The legendary systems thinker Donella Meadows, seriously a giant in this field, she identified a whole hierarchy of 12 leverage points, 12 places you can intervene in a system. But here's her most profound and kind of painful insight.
We almost always focus our energy on the wrong ones, the places with the absolute least power to create any real, lasting change.
Let's go back to our traffic jam example. At the very bottom of the list, the lowest point of leverage is fiddling with parameters. Things like changing the timing on the traffic lights. Sure, it might help a little bit, but it's not going to solve the problem. Now, a medium leverage point would be changing information flows, like giving every driver a GPS with real-time traffic data so they can find a better route. That's better for sure. But a high leverage point? That's something like changing the entire goal of the system. What if the goal isn't move cars as fast as possible anymore? What if the goal becomes move people as efficiently as possible? All of a sudden, you're not just thinking about highways. You're thinking about subways, bike lanes, walkable neighborhoods. You've totally changed the game. And that really brings us to the core takeaway here. Systems thinking isn't just a bunch of diagrams and tools. It is a fundamentally different way of seeing the world and your role within it.
This is the most crucial shift you can make. When something goes wrong, our gut instinct is to ask, who's to blame? Who messed up? But a systems thinker learns to ask a different question. They ask, what is the structure here that's producing this behavior over and over again? Instead of blaming people, they start looking for the flawed system that makes bad choices seem like the only rational option. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. This quote from Donella Meadows just says it all perfectly. You can't understand a traffic jam by just staring at one car. You can't understand a market crash by looking at one trader. You have to step back and see the whole thing, the parts, of course, but more importantly, the connections and the relationships between the parts. So I'll leave you with this thought. The next time you're banging your head against the wall with some stubborn, persistent problem, just stop and ask yourself, what if the problem isn't the players? What if the problem is the game itself? And what if, instead of trying to fix the people, you started trying to change the rules of the game? Thanks for joining me on this explainer.